Hello everyone and welcome back. Today let's start by looking at something my father wrote 6 years ago in the Trumpet magazine. He said President Obama's speech, he's talking about the Cairo speech back in June of 2009. He said that speech is a great turning point in this world. It's going to play a major role in terrifying prophecies of your Bible being fulfilled. And it really has. Just look at the headlines today. Let's notice what it said at the Politico just a few days ago. Barack Obama faces a slew of Middle East crises that some call the worst in a generation, as new chaos from Yemen to Iraq, along with deteriorating U.S.-Israeli relations, is confounding the president's efforts to stabilize the region and strike a nuclear deal with Iran. Today we're going to sift through some of these most recent stunning headlines and see how they are leading to the direct fulfillment of several terrifying prophecies. I'd like to begin here today by just looking at a video. You may have seen some clips from this on the news recently. It was about a week and a half ago. But this was President Obama's message to the people of Iran, his Nowruz greeting, an Iranian holiday. And he had this to say about this forthcoming nuclear deal that the United States and Iran are negotiating.
My message to you, the people of Iran, is that together we have to speak up for the future we seek. As I've said many times before, I believe that our countries should be able to resolve this issue peacefully with diplomacy. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has issued a fatwa against the development of nuclear weapons, and President Rouhani has said that Iran would never develop a nuclear weapon. Together with the international community, the United States has said that Iran should have access to peaceful nuclear energy, consistent with Iran's international obligations. So there is a way for Iran, if it is willing to take meaningful, verifiable steps, to assure the world that its nuclear program is in fact for peaceful purposes only.
So you see the president there putting great faith in some statements evidently that have been made, that it's all for peace, that we're not going to build a bomb and so on. And yet just 2 days after he made those remarks, they continued again with the chance for death to America, and the Ayatollah was right there leading the way, the supreme leader. Death to America. This was the quote. They were chanting it, the crowd, and then the supreme leader, Khamenei, says, of course, yes, death to America, because America is the original source of this pressure. America's the problem. Of course, death to America. Of course, that's where we stand. Of course, this is our main objective here. He went on and talked about how America insists on putting pressure on our dear people and on our economy. He's trying to drive a wedge, America is, between the leaders of Iran and the people of Iran. America's the problem here. America's trying to divide. America's the great Satan. Death to America. Of course, yes. Last month, just in February, they staged this missile attack on a mock-up of one of the American U.S. aircraft carriers. Missile exercises against an American target. And so if they're going to place great faith on certain statements that have been made, what about all these other very public statements that are made repeatedly over and over again every week after Friday prayers? Every week, when the supreme leader gives a message on Saturday or whenever. This is from Fox News just the other day. It says, while the U.S. haggles with Iran over nuclear weapons, the Islamic Republic is aggressively building up a navy, a move that has regional neighbors concerned The focus on Tehran's nuclear weapons capabilities could be a mistake if it comes at the exclusion of addressing the seafaring capabilities of the rogue regime, not to mention the active proxy fighting Iran is engaging in throughout the Middle East. A former U.S. Army officer with intimate knowledge of the Iranian military told FoxNews.com, it says, and it isn't just an analyst warning that Iran has plans to project power and influence around the Persian Gulf. It's not just coming from an analyst, that is. He says the nation's top military officials are rattling their sabers on a near daily basis. I mean, they're saying it, and then they're backing it up with action. And you can see them on the march. It's like I said recently in another video we produced. Just imagine ISIS, which has gotten a lot of headlines, and rightfully so, in recent months. Imagine ISIS with nukes. That's what this world is facing. The Islamic State that's in Iran, which now has control over these two straits, these two choke points, where the flow of oil passes. Of course, it already controls the Straits of Hormuz, but then now with the takeover of Yemen, there's that other choke point of access as well. My father's talked about that recently on the Key of David, on the Yemen program. You see this Islamic movement on the march. General Soleimani, who's heading up the operations in Iraq, just as we talked about 20 years ago, and just as we told you, as the United States was preparing for the withdrawal a few years back, that what we've done is effectively hand over Iraq on a silver platter to Iran, and that's what's happened. That's what's taken shape. And yet, if you look at Washington today, if you look at the current administration in charge of the United States of America today, you see all of these radical movements on the march, gaining ground. And yet the strongest criticism coming out of Washington is reserved for the little nation of Israel, the one nation in the Middle East that's there as a champion for democracy, that's there as what's been historically America's closest ally in the region. And yet look at how the relationship between the United States and America has deteriorated. Of course, in the last several years, we've been telling you about this and preparing you for it in advance, for a number of years, in fact, based upon definite prophecies of God that talk about this alliance severing. It's just that in recent months, it's especially bad. It's reached a real low point, going back to the early part of March, of course, with Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech at Congress, the U.S. Congress, and how that just incensed the White House, that just incensed the Obama administration, that took it as a slap in the face, as nothing more than an Israeli election ploy on the part of Mr. Netanyahu. There were the comments that he made leading up to those recent Israeli elections, which of course he won handily. But the comments he made leading up to it, his supposed disavowal of the two-state solution, he came out soon after and clarified those remarks and basically said, look, in the current climate, given what ISIS is doing in Syria and Iraq, considering what's happening in Yemen, Hezbollah in Syria, in this climate, the fact that, most importantly, that Fatah has entered into an alliance with Hamas. Given all of this, of course we can't pursue a two-state solution. That's what he said when he came out and clarified it. But the way the Obama administration has viewed it, it's as if Israel has gone back on its word and has made, or taken an unforgivable position. There was also the Election Day video that circulated where Mr. Netanyahu talked about Arab Israelis descending in droves to vote against him on Election Day, which was true, but that was taken as an insensitive remark or perhaps even racist. That's what the Obama administration was insinuating. Again, these remarks, these unforgivable remarks. The White House Chief of Staff, he gave a speech at J Street, a liberal gathering, and he talked about some of these comments the Prime Minister had made recently. Even after, in the case of the two-state solution, the remarks were clarified, and then as far as the Arabs turning out for the election in droves, he later apologized for that remark and said he didn't mean any offense by it. He apologized to the Israeli Arabs in his own nation, and then went on to talk about, because of the democracy in that nation, that they had the freedom to vote and that he was proud to represent them as their prime minister. And yet the White House Chief of Staff said at that J Street meeting, we cannot simply pretend that those comments were never made. We can't act like he didn't say those things. Even if he did apologize, we can't pretend that he didn't make those remarks. Mr. Obama himself, President Obama, said, we take him at his word when he said that it wouldn't happen during his prime ministership, talking about the two-state solution. And then he went on to say how that the United States would evaluate what other options are available. It's time to start looking for other solutions. It's time to start doing something, no matter what Israel does or says. This was from the Telegraph here in the UK. Mr. Obama's remarks reflect a deep anger in the administration at Mr. Netanyahu, apparently ruling out a two-state solution for the Middle East and using racially charged warnings that Israeli Arabs were voting in droves to scare up votes on the Israeli right. They going back to what it says there at the top, these remarks reflect deep anger in the administration. That's what you see. Anger, resentment over what's being said, just comments coming out of Israel. The Prime Minister of Israel can't get away with this, they say, the U.S. officials say. We can't pretend like these things weren't said. And yet, again, just think about the things that are being said in Tehran and that have been said for some 35 years. Things that are 1,000 times worse. Horrible statements. Racist statements. Genocidal statements. And they're just made over and over again. And what you see happening effectively in the United States today, in Washington in particular, is officials pretending that those statements were never made, or that they were just, for show at home, but they don't really have any meaning. What a standard, what a double standard, where one of America's long-standing friends, I can't say, but, he has to carefully watch every single word. And then you look at what's coming out, as I said, of Tehran. This is what Bret Stephens had to say March 23rd. There's an upside-down quality to this president's worldview. His administration is now on better terms with Iran, whose Houthi proxies, with the slogan, God is great, death to America, death to Israel, damn the Jews, power to Islam, just deposed Yemen's legitimate president, than it is with Israel. It's on better terms with Iran than it is with Israel. What does that tell you about the world today? What does that tell you about what my father said in June 2009 about that speech in Cairo, and how that it would lead to several terrifying prophecies being fulfilled? Well, we're seeing it happen. We're seeing it happen. We're seeing the relationship between the United States and Israel as damaged as it's ever been. I mean, it's almost a daily occurrence now where stories are being leaked or rumors are being spread that are intended solely to smear Israel, to undermine Prime Minister Netanyahu. The fact that he's a racist, the fact that Israel spied on America during these negotiations. This was what the New York Times said regarding all of this criticism coming from Washington. It said on March 24th, Israelis have been astonished by the unrelenting White House criticism that has helped sink relations between Washington and Jerusalem to a nadir not seen for more than 25 years. The worst in a generation. That's the New York Times. Just talking about this unrelenting criticism coming from Washington. Here recently, there was just a few days ago, a story in Israeli papers about the United States coming out and revealing the nuclear secrets of Israel. This is really a shocking report that didn't get much coverage in the Western press. It's from Arutz Sheva in Israel, March 25th. Notice this. It says, in a development that has largely been missed by mainstream media, the Pentagon early last month quietly declassified a Department of Defense top-secret document detailing Israel's nuclear program, a highly covert topic that Israel has never formally announced, to avoid a regional nuclear arms race, and which the U.S. until now has respected by remaining silent. I mean, this goes back to, as it says there, 1987. But by publishing the declassified document from 1987, the U.S. reportedly breached the silent agreement to keep quiet on Israel's nuclear powers for the first time ever, detailing the nuclear program in great depth. In great depth. Now it's just wide open. It's all out there. President Reagan didn't reveal it. His successor, you go through Bush, Clinton, and on through. But not until today has it been revealed. The timing of the revelation is highly suspect, given that it came as tensions spiraled out of control between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the U.S. President Barack Obama ahead of Netanyahu's March 9th address in Congress, in which he warned against the dangers of Iran's nuclear program and how the deal being formed on the program leaves the Islamic regime with nuclear breakout capabilities. It's in response to that warning. According to this article, another highly suspicious aspect of the document is that while the Pentagon saw fit to declassify sections on Israel's sensitive nuclear program, it kept sections on Italy, France, West Germany, and other NATO countries classified, with those sections blocked out in the document. So you have this 300 and some page document, huge sections redacted, huge sections blocked out, and yet all of these very detailed, formally classified bits of information that are now made public. Well, everyone knew Israel had nukes, but there was a silent agreement, as was said, just to try to keep this explosion of weapons from spreading across the region, to try to prevent an arms race. How do you suppose the mullahs react to reports like this? And how does that factor into negotiations where they're sitting down at the table with Secretary John Kerry saying, well, how can you twist our arm here? Israel has them. Why can't we have them? What's to stop now Saudi Arabia as they see Iran on the march? Well, Saudi Arabia is already acting because of what's happening at their border with Yemen, amassing troops, sending in an air campaign. I mean, we're just one step removed from all-out war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That's where we are. What happens when something triggers a larger escalation? And what does it say about our world today when you have this civil war in Yemen break out and the United States and Britain leave and Saudi Arabia puts its foot down and says, we've got to try to stop this Islamic movement coming out of Iran. It's taking over the Middle East. It's expanding its sphere of influence in Iraq and Syria with Hezbollah and even right around Israel with Hamas and so on. What a world we're living in. Let's look at Hosea 5 just to stress a couple of prophecies here. And it is, as my father said in that comment in 2009, it is the beginning of something terrifying happening as the United States has basically left the region and handed the keys over to Tehran. What a world we're in when you see the United States of America on better terms with Iran than it is with Israel. And yet that is what's happening. Hosea 5 and verse 13, it says, when Ephraim saw his sickness and Judah saw his wound, then went Ephraim to the Assyrian and sent to King Jareb, yet could he not heal you, nor cure you of your wound. We've talked so much about this particular prophecy and how that when little Judah, the nation of Israel today, the little nation in the Middle East, that because relations between Judah and Manasseh or the United States get so bad, they're going to turn to Germany and to Europe for help. Surely you can see that that's where this is headed. Surely you can see that when push comes to shove and Israel realizes it's past the point of no return, they're not going to be reaching out to the United States for help. Not given what's happening right now. You can see where this is headed. Let's look at Daniel chapter 11, another prophecy we refer to quite often, Daniel 11, and this clash that's going to happen between Europe and the rise of radical Islam, spearheaded by Iran. Iran's the head of the snake, as we've been saying for more than 20 years. Iran will take over Iraq, as we said more than 20 years ago. And then there's going to be these two definite camps in the Middle East. You can see it spelled out in Psalm 83. We don't have time to go through all these prophecies, but like my father said, these are terrifying developments. You can see it spelled out for you in Bible prophecy. Psalm 83 talks about two definite camps developing in the Middle East. The Iranian head of the snake, spreading radical Islam, and then the camp that includes nations like Saudi Arabia that put up resistance against it, and that form an alliance with this European power, Germany. And it's leading to Daniel 11 in verse 40, which says, and at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. That's really the only thing you don't see. Obviously, my father's obviously talked about Germany and the European Union spreading around Iran. I mean, they're there. They're just not making the headlines like ISIS and like Iran is now making and like the United States is making. But once the clash happens, you're going to see Germany and Europe visibly out front, dealing with this head of the snake head on. That's what the Bible prophesies, and we're at the very beginning stages of this clash. When you look at all these other things that are happening, I mean, the way is being cleared for it to happen. Verse 41 says, and he shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand. Edom, Moab, the chief of the children of Ammon. And then down in verse 44 it says, but tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. This brings us then further into the prophesied great tribulation, that fifth trumpet blast referred to in the book of Revelation. And once this final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire is on the march and deals with this threat in Iran, then tidings out of the east are going to cause great concern. And you have then this full-scale world war. That's what your Bible talks about. That's what my father was saying. We've got to begin to prepare for some of these terrifying prophecies to unfold. You go back to that Cairo speech, what President Obama said in 2009, and then look on our website and read what we said about it. Specifically, my father's article, How President Obama's Cairo Speech Will Shake the Nations. It sounded great at the time. Reach out, extend an olive branch, try to form more of a friendship with Islam. But look at where we are today. Look at the chaos in the region. Look at the relationship between the United States and Israel. Go back and read what we were saying. More recently, we did that video I mentioned earlier about the Iranian threat and how that you can imagine ISIS with nukes, basically. You can find that also on our website, thetrumpet.com, and also at our YouTube channel, where we have all of the Trumpet dailies there on the channel. And then lastly, look on the trumpet.com for an article titled The Band of Brothers as well. That talks about this alliance between the United States, Britain, and Judah, or the little nation, that's Israel in the Middle East, and how that alliance really is breaking up here in these latter days. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time